Welcome back to Jen's Addiction. I'm so glad that you all came back to see me on what I think will be a howling good time as I discuss the Wolfman and werewolves. I am absolutely, as you know, in love with all things classic monster related. And one character that I believe is a little underrated is the Wolfman. Ever since I first saw Lon Chaney Jr. don that infamous and fantastical makeup in the Wolfman made by Jack Pierce, I was hooked. And although I would never say that when asked who my favorite monster character is, that the Wolfman would always be the first thing that I would choose. But I'm starting to wonder why that is not the case, because he is iconic, or she, iconic and everywhere. Growing up in the 70s and the 80s, I think we had some amazing examples from the past into the present of werewolves in movies, literature, collectibles, stories, poetry, visual. I mean, you name it, it was everywhere. And I just really cannot imagine a character that is not as entrenched in our culture and our subculture in our minds like a werewolf. I was just out the other night, the full moon came up at the beginning of October, and my mind immediately goes to howling wolves and those amazing moments in cinema when you see a person transform into a werewolf, and it just makes me happy. And I don't know why, but it does. So I thought it would be kind of fun to just maybe reminisce a little bit about some of my favorite werewolf films, some of my favorite collectibles that I have, and just, maybe bring a little special interest and a little extra notoriety to the werewolf, because I do think that werewolves are probably, as far as characters and monster lore, a little underrated, at least amongst those that I talk to. So if you think that a werewolf is probably the number one monster character, at least in the Universal or any monster universe, I would love to know down in the comments below. Please post your favorite werewolf toys, your favorite movies, perhaps your favorite moments in cinema when a transformation into a werewolf occurred. Did you dress up like a werewolf when you were little? Did you run around and howl at the moon at night? I think that's like all the fun stuff that just, is crazy good about monsters, and I don't know, just makes it extra fun. So please hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. If you're new to my channel, I do talk a little bit about monsters, a little bit about comics. I talk a lot about records. So I really hope that you'll stay around for all the fun and share this particular episode with those who you think might also enjoy a little werewolf fun of their own. So on that note, I will go ahead and carry on. I do have some notes, so forgive me if I read them, but there's just so much information, you guys. And if I don't look at my notes every now and then, I probably will get it wrong. So if I mispronounce any words, if I don't mention a movie or anything that you might be thinking of, again, kind of put those down in the notes below. I will try my best, but I'm just highlighting some of the things that I enjoy and that stand out the most to me. But there is so much. I mean, you can find werewolf lore all the way back to 2100 BC, when Greek mythology would write stories about Greek gods coming down and changing men into werewolves or these type of wolf-like creatures. So the stories go way, way far back. Little examples here and there. I think some of note might be in 1847, of course, there were all the editions of the Penny Dreadful stories that brought a lot of monsters sort of front and center into the minds of many, and that whole era in time loved those stories so much. And some of the first werewolf stories appeared in some of those Penny Dreadfuls for the mass population to kind of devour, if you will. Wagner the Werewolf was a Penny Dreadful story that was written in 1847. That's kind of an early one that I think was inspirational in some of the ways in which we look at and think about werewolves today. There was also a story by Alfred Marchard, The Wolfman, that was written in 1922, French writer. That story is also credited as sort of being the basis of some of the other lead-ins to the modern werewolf stories. There was a movie in 1932 called The Haunted People. That one, I believe, was drawn from Alfred's story. So definitely a ton of literature out there to check out and things to read. If you really are into reading about werewolves, of course, those types of stories are great. There's modern stories. I mean, everything from Twilight to even the wonderful vampire author Anne Rice had done a couple of stories, was doing I can't remember if it was going to be a really, really long going series, but the first two books that she had written in her werewolf um, series, I thought were really kind of fun and kind of fun to read. So lots of things to check out. If you have any good werewolf stories that you love to read, maybe put them in the comments below to share. I always love to find other fun and adventurous things to look into and to read. So those would be kind of fun. But of course, one of the most popular werewolf stories that we would know would start with the 1935 film with Henry Hall, which was Werewolf of London. That story was, of course, just so iconic. I think everything about that particular story is sort of tees up what we end up seeing in 1941 with the Wolfman. But again, it is an early story. It is a little bit different than the modern Wolfman stories. In Werewolf of London, Henry Hall's character is a botanist. He gets infected with a disease or a bite that turns him into this wolf character. He has to develop or find a plant rather that he reads about that if it glows and blooms, I think it's under the full moon, he can cure himself of being a werewolf. But everything kind of goes awry and things don't ever work out the way they're supposed to. That also was one of the first times that we see Jack Pierce developing his legendary makeup for the character. Initially, it was going to be a more full face makeup. There had been early stories that Henry Hall did not want to do that makeup because he just didn't like the idea that his face was going to be covered up. He wanted to be seen. But I think probably the true story would fall more in realm with the account by Cortland Hall, which is the relative of Henry Hall, that Henry had said really it was about staying true to the story, that in that particular story that the main character, Wilfred Glendon, his friends can look at that monster that he turns into and tell that it is him. So if he covered his face up too much, that would not be able to be achieved. So he felt it was a better way to stay true to the script and the story, to kind of pull back and have some restraint on the makeup. And that's probably, in my opinion, I bet that is absolutely what the situation was. It makes sense. I mean, if you had done a full face like Lon Chaney, you would never know, presumably, who it was that turned into the Wolfman, right? So I really love Werewolf of London. I think it's a wonderful classic. If you've not caught that one yet, I would totally look into checking that one out. It just has some amazing sequences and scenes, and I think it is just an absolute standout when you look at histories of horror movies. I mean, that is just absolutely perfect. But really, one of my absolute favorites, because to me, I think it just has to be a favorite no matter what, is the I think I'm going to say this wrong because it was written by screenplay for the modern Wolfman was done by Kurt Sodemak. And I never can pronounce his last name right. I will put his name on the screen, but he was responsible for writing the 1941 The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. He was also responsible for penning this famous poem for the movie, of which this one part was always written. So even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. Who doesn't love that, right? It's a little bit longer. There's a full verse, but they use that for the movie. I think Maria Ouspenskaya, is that right? Recites that poem. Of course, you hear Larry Talbot recite it in other movies. So it's just, I don't know. I can't even imagine a Wolfman story or the legend of Wolfman lore without that. I'm sure many of you, if you are friends and you guys know each other and you maybe are fans of the movies, would say those words back and forth. I know I have. So anyway, I really love that poem. I think it's beautiful. It conjures up so much energy and imagery. And that particular movie just is a powerhouse of amazing universal actors. Claude Rains is Sir John Talbot. Claude will also go on to be the Invisible Man. I think that, I mean, he is just a standout actor. Of course, I'd already mentioned Maria Ouspenskaya. She plays the gypsy woman who is the mother to Bela Lugosi's character of Bela, who is the original Wolfman character in the movie who transforms into the wolf and bites Larry, Lon Chaney Jr., and transforming him into that Wolfman character. Evelyn Ankers is Gwen, Larry's love interest within the movie. And I always had a special spot in my heart for Faye Helm. She does the character of Jenny. I loved the idea that there was a character named Jenny, even though Jenny meets her untimely demise in the movie. But it is just such an amazing, amazing film. It's the first full time that you get to see Jack Pierce's ideas of the makeup for this character come full force. The transformation and the way that they transform Lon Chaney Jr. into the Wolfman was pretty historic for cinema. I mean, there was just so much happening there, and I just cannot imagine a more perfect Wolfman movie. Now, having said that, and of course, I'm biased. I am a Universal monster movie fan. If you've not checked out the particular movie that I've just spoken about, The Wolfman, I would highly recommend it, as I would any Universal monster movie. I think they're absolute monster perfection. I can't imagine better representations, especially when you think about early cinema and those stories. I mean, everything that we have going forward to me is rooted and based in a lot of these key movies, and The Wolfman is absolutely no exception. You will go on to have many other additional films. Now, if you're trying to find other things to watch, I would recommend checking it out. Of course, there's a full grouping of Wolfman movies, all starring Lon Chaney Jr., but the ones that I really like the most would be 1943's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. There you get to have Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. back again to relive those roles. But unfortunately for Bela, his time as the Frankenstein monster did not, I don't think, work out as good as it could, and he was not given the credit he deserved, but that's a story for another time. 1948, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Again, Lon Chaney Jr. is back. He's doing the character of Larry Talbot. It is such an integral part of that story, and it's just a ton of fun, and I really, really do love it. 1981, we get The Howling. 1985, you get Teen Wolf. And then, of course, there is a few other versions. I think I should back up before I even talk about the 80s. Hammer House of Horror only did one Wolfman movie. They did that in 1961 with The Curse of the Werewolf. And that is an amazingly crazy, deep story. If you've never seen that story, it is like a slow burn. You get a kind of a very almost graphic, violent beginning where it outlines how this poor mute woman becomes kind of falls prey to somebody who causes her to have a baby who is born to being a wolf. And it's just an incredibly it's set like in the 18th century in Spain. There is I think it's the main character's name is Leon. He becomes an adopted child to another couple. It has a very tragic ending. It's a crazy story. It is a good story, but it's an intense story. And it's not, I don't know, Hammer. It's just how they do those movies. They have an intensity all their own anyway. And I think that this particular adaptation of a werewolf story in Curse of the Werewolf is just like nothing else. I think it is so. I don't know. If you've never seen it, and you feel like watching it, I would definitely recommend watching it. If you love horror movies, if you love classic horror movies, if you like Hammer House of Horror movies, if you aren't into that, maybe it wouldn't be necessarily your cup of tea. Maybe stick with Universal Films, but it is an intense movie, and it's the only, to my knowledge, the only Hammer film that they ever did focusing on a werewolf or a wolfman. So I just think that is just, I don't know. And I think it's just, I don't know, the intensity on that story. No spoilers for it, but I always thought it was a very graphic, intense story. It really surprised me. There was a person named Guy Endor who had written a book called Werewolf of Paris. And I believe that is the novelization that the Hammer film was adapted from. So you might want to check that particular one out too. Again, if you like Hammer movies, if you like an intense story, I think you would really probably find that particular movie super interesting. If you just want to watch it as part of the legacy of the werewolf, of Hollywood films, of that genre. Of course, Famous Monsters of Filmland also covers that movie a lot. The imagery is out there, but I remember the first time I ever saw it, and I was just kind of blown away. It was really an intense story. So that was 1961. Like I said, 81 was The Howling. 85, a little more light beat and upbeat, with Teen Wolf. 2002's Dog Soldiers. I think that is just crazy fun, just kind of modern wolf lore, werewolf stories, kind of at its absolute best. But my absolute favorite that I would have to say would be the American Werewolf in London. I cannot think of a story that captivates my mind and has been a part of me, even just parts that I recite from the movie, since I was a little kid. Like, I think it's just a crazy good film. I mean, John Landis, that was a 1981 movie. Rick Baker won the inaugural Academy Award for Best Makeup for his special effects and makeup for that movie. And it is absolutely mind blowing. I remember being too young to go to the theater to see it. My mom and dad went to go see it, and they came home and were just like, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe watching this man turn into a werewolf. It was like nothing we'd ever seen. Where Jack Pierce kind of started that with that visual special effects, it was Rick Baker who really took it to the next level and kind of blew everybody's minds. And so it was just absolutely fantastic. David Naughton is in that. You also have Griffin Dunn. So they're kind of the two leads in that role. One of my favorite parts is watching Griffin Dunn transform throughout the movie after he's attacked. And he doesn't get to become a werewolf, but he gets to become something else. And there's a moment when David Naughton's character is in a movie theater, and then there is Griffin Dunn and all this monster, dastardly horror. And he's kind of like taken aback by his appearance. And Griffin Dunn's character is just like, David, you're hurting my feelings. And that was like my favorite line. And so I got to meet them a while back at a monster convention, and they both signed this picture for me. And when I told Griffin Dunn that was my favorite line of the movie, he wrote, "Jennifer, you're hurting my feelings." And I don't know. I just love that so much. The fact that he was so into that and so willing and just on cue, I didn't have to ask him to write it. He just did it. Just made my little monster heart swell. So I was super excited about that. But, I'm sure many of you out there have watched that movie. It is really, besides the Wolfman, American Werewolf in London is probably my favorite werewolf movie. I just love everything about it. Even though we'll get modern versions with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, I don't know. I just cannot think of a better full visual moment than seeing that particular movie. So that's kind of my thought process around some of the movies, and the ones that I would choose anyway, the ones that I would highlight. So definitely the classics, with Werewolf of London, The Wolfman, Curse of the Werewolf, and of course, American Werewolf in London. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this little extra trip down memory lane for me as I discuss the Wolfman, a Universal Monsters character that I think is really underrated, and I just wanted to shed a little moonlight on, if you would. And you indulged me, and it was really fun. I just love showcasing the things that I have in my collection, from toys to books, and of course, all the wonderful movies that we can stream, or if you own them, I always encourage you to dust them off a little bit and get them out no matter what time of year it is. So until next time, I hope you guys are still spinning some great tunes, but that you're also watching some amazing classic cinema and classic monster movies this year, and making your first stop this season, The Wolfman. Have a howling good time. Bye-bye.